everyone, welcome to Hear Our Voices. My name is Knox, and today I have the honor to interview the author of More Than Just a Pretty Face, Syed Masood. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. So before we get started, I would just like to say Hear Our Voices is a book tour company that revolves around giving Own Voices reviewers a chance to read their Own Voices books. We believe that Own Voices reviewers, their voices need to be amplified and to hear them. And so we're super grateful to be able to have a tour for More Than Just a Pretty Face and get it into the hands of Own Voices reviewers. With that said, let's get started with the interview.
Okay, let's go.
All right. So my first question is actually about you, not More Than Just a Pretty Face, but what's just a random fact that you think people should know about you that they don't already? It could be serious, it could be fun, you know.
Well, I'm not sure if people know this, but I have two kids, 6 and 3, and I'm pretty sure my 3-year-old is a little evil, but but in a fun way. But she has a very interesting mind, and I'm learning a lot from her. For example, she came up to me one day and she said, "Can I go play with my brother?" I said, "You can do whatever you want." And she just stands there for a long time staring at me, and then she says, "Can I play with a knife?" And so,
Oh my goodness.
I'm a little frightened, but she's hilarious and she's awesome. But anyway, that's one major part of my
I'm pretty sure there's a Vine with that. It's like, what do you have? A knife. No! That's great. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think how I would even react to that situation.
Well, I mean, I asked for it, right? Because I told her she could do whatever she wanted, so her reaction was appropriate. It was just out of left field. I did not see that coming. So
you're just like,
not that.
No, but thank you for asking. All right. The second question is to describe More Than Just a Pretty Face to those who might just be hearing about it right now.
Sure. More Than Just a Pretty Face is a romantic comedy with some serious elements to it. It's a story about Daniel Jelani, who is a young man who's self-described as not being very bright academically, but who has a very kind personality and soul. So it's an exploration in ways of not only his love life, but also his friendships and what the value of a person is. I especially coming from an immigrant background, sometimes, academics are the end all and be all of what young people are expected to be focused on. But I just feel like having a good heart is way more important and gets overlooked. So he's a young man with some unusual qualities, or not unusual qualities, underappreciated qualities. And it's a story about how he rises above everyone's expectations as far as academics are concerned, learns a bit about history, and meets the love of his life. So that's the story.
All right. I appreciate having how academics are usually like the end all be all, because as a current college student, I know how it's like, okay, but school first. Like
Right.
all the time, just always like, okay, but school first. You're getting like A's, right? Like my dad, if I get like an A-, will be like, okay, but what about the A+?
Yes.
So I appreciate that, your book focuses on a character who there's more than just the academics and highlighting those underappreciated qualities, because I really liked that when I was reading about him.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I think the first year after we moved from Pakistan, I'm a first generation immigrant in the sense that I was 14 or so when we first moved. And I was getting like a 96 or 97 in a science class, and my father went to a parent teacher meeting and he was like, "What is wrong with my son? Why isn't he doing better in school?" And the teacher the next day was like, "What is wrong with your dad?" So I completely relate to that.
That happens, like, unfortunately a lot, but I like that. Like I said, I like how you highlighted that there's more to him. All right, the third question is, what would you say is the heart of the book? So like deep down.
I think Daniel's relationship with Bisma is, you know, they are working together on this project where they're learning about the history of Winston Churchill, specifically the history of the Bengal famine, which is a huge tragedy which killed over 3 million people, and it doesn't get talked about a lot. And so they're talking about Churchill's role in it, the role of the British Raj in that tragedy. And, you know, the way they discover not only each other and not only history, but also things about themselves um, uh, as they're progressing to the project, I think is, I think that's the main part of the book. And it's sort of the reason for the title, because that's how Daniel becomes more than just a, I mean, he always was in some ways, but that's how he really discovers for himself that he's more than just a pretty face.
All right. I like that. And the next question is, how would you describe Daniel, Bisma, and Kaval?
I think Daniel is, he's the one with the best heart in the book, right? I mean, he is the one who is always accepting of people. He never expects people to live up to his expectations when they let him down. He always feels like, oh, maybe I misread them. Maybe their flaws are expected and I was expecting too much. So he's always introspective that way. He's very accepting. Uh, Kaval is an interesting young woman. She is more driven. She knows exactly what she wants. She's unapologetic about it. And one of the things I wanted to do was, and I was able to do this because of Daniel, because Daniel sort of, in a first person narrative, you're always limited, you know, to what you can say or do, even when it comes to some own voices issues. Like, for example, his view on marriage, you know, in the beginning of the book, he says some things about marriage that are a little off base, but you're in the first person narrative of a 19-year-old kid who admittedly is not very bright, so he's going to say and do some stupid things, so you're limited in your scope. But Daniel was able to give me the ability to look at someone like Kabo who may not want the same kind of things he wants, and him still being able to appreciate that as being valid was really great. And then Bisma is actually a lot like Kaval, but in a different way. She's also very certain of who she is. She's different than who Kaval is, but both the young women in the book are very much more on firm footing as to their personalities than Daniel is, in the sense that Daniel is more searching for who he wants to be, while especially Bisma, having lived through more experiences and unfortunate ones, has more of an idea of who what her personality is. So he's surrounded by some strong women. His mom is also really cool. So
I like his mom a lot.
yeah, so there were some great female characters, and I love that about the book.
I did too. I loved reading them. I loved how certain they were, and how I think with the first person narrative, we really got a chance to see him grow as a character throughout the story. So I think I really enjoyed that.
Oh, thank you.
So the idea of speaking out on something that's important to us, even if it can upset others and backfire on us, is incredibly prevalent in this book, especially with the Churchill and the Renaissance Man competition. And I think that internal struggle, like what should I do, was incredibly well done. So what made you want to write about this, and how did you go about it?
Well, I'm not sure if he's still around. I'm not sure if he'll hear this, but my Shakespeare professor in college was just really mean.
Oh, I felt that.
And you know, I wrote an essay. I remember I wrote this essay about something. I think it was Hamlet. I forget what play it was, but I wrote this essay, and he called me to his office, and he's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "You know, this is my view of what Shakespeare was trying to say." And the professor's like, "No one cares about your view of what Shakespeare wants to say. What I care about was what Shakespeare was saying, and we already know what he was saying." I'm like, how do you know? But you know, I sort of took that energy and gave it to the history teacher, who Daniel ends up sort of not really in an antagonistic relationship with, but more in Daniel's mind is a relationship where the teacher doesn't like him. That's how he feels. But it's this idea that there are certain accepted views and you can't deviate from those. and that happens in history a lot, as well as literature, unfortunately. So anyway, that was where I got the idea from, the initial thought. And then I was just reading about Winston Churchill. I was reading this book called Churchill's Secret War, which was about the Bengal famine. And you know, I got interested in the idea of how did Churchill get forgiven, but someone like a young woman in a community who makes a choice, a personal choice, doesn't get forgiven, you know. And so I don't know how, but the energy from my Shakespeare professor collided with the energy from Churchill and this idea of forgiveness, and the book was born. So
wow.
so you know, appreciate your terrible professors. They will. And you know what, to be fair, he was not terrible. He was just very set in his ways. He was just very set in his ways, and he thought he knew exactly what everything meant, and that's fine. I wrote what he wanted me to write, and I got an A. But you know, but yeah, you'll meet professors and people like that, and it's also good practice for the workplace, because you'll also meet people like that in the workplace. So and who knows, they might inspire you someday to write your own books.
All right, keep notes on every time a professor says something.
You will need notes. You'll remember it, trust me.
Oh, I know, I'll remember that. I would love to see our Shakespeare professors get together, because mine would have been like, as long as you can prove it, then we're good.
Right, and that's the thing. But you know, he again, we're talking about someone who was very set in his ways, and you know, I always remember his. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm actually very fond of him. But because there's a lot of memories associated with him. You know, our final exam was a multiple choice exam in English literature for Shakespeare, and all it was random quotes from all the plays, and you had to identify who was speaking. So he would give you a quote. For example, he'd give us a quote which was, "But remember my promise," "But remember your promise to me." And where in Shakespeare does that appear, and who says it? And you gotta pick it out from multiple choice. That particular one is from The Tempest, but you know, it's and I remember that because it was on the exam. But so it was very unusual person. But he went to school with Patrick Stewart, so
Hey,
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
yeah.
All right, so what is the main thing that you want readers to take away from reading More Than Just a Pretty Face?
Well, first I want them to have fun, right? I mean, it's a comedy, it's a rom-com. Yes, there are serious elements to it. Yes, we do discuss history, and we discuss some political issues come up later in the book in very brief ways. But I want people to have fun. Aside from that, just the idea that, you know, one of Danielle's strengths, like we talked about earlier, is accepting people and not judging them, and trying to find a way to fit them into his worldview and helping them if you can. And I think people should just learn to make space for other people. And I mean, it's a great thing for own voices too, but you know, you're gonna have people who disagree with you in life. You're gonna have people with different values. You're gonna have people with different lived experiences. And if you can try to approach them like Daniel Jelani approaches them, with an open mind and open heart, you will do better by them and by yourself than if you try to impose your will on them. And I think that's an important lesson in the book.
All right. So what are some books that have inspired you as a writer?
Oh, so many. Let's see. When I was writing this particular book, and specifically, I read Nick Stone's Dear Martin right around that time. And
I have it on my shelf.
It's on my shelf somewhere too. But you know, that was an excellent book, and it really was eye-opening for me, because I was gonna, you know, this was before I had decided to write about Churchill, but I was in the process of sort of thinking about what I'm gonna write, and it sounds weird, but it gave me permission to write about a historical figure in a personalized way, you know, and that's what Dear Martin does. And obviously the relationship is very different between the historical figure and Dear Martin and Churchill here, obviously. But sort of the idea that you could go back and look at a historical figure and personalize it for a young person. That was really cool, and that book really helped me sort of see that I was allowed to do that, if that makes any sense. Katie Henry's Heretics Anonymous, which is amazing. That's set in a Catholic school, but you'll see a lot of the same kind of struggles that some of the people in the book are having, in this book are having with Islam, as people were having with Katie's book. That's excellent. And obviously the histories about Churchill, I looked those up and spent time with those. And I think that's, I mean, you know, the I don't know how wide to go, but immediately those are the few that come to mind.
Like the Cliff Notes version.
Right.
It's like there's always so much more to everything.
There's so many great books, and there's so many great Muslim authors now coming up, and what's amazing is how diverse the voices within the Muslim community that are coming out are, and I love that. I love that the Hina Wars came out, and I love that Arwin is writing another book, and you know, you have all kinds of different Muslim representation, which is great, because some identities, especially the Muslim identity, is subject to this sort of, this is the monolith that you see on TV, and this is what you see on the news, and this is who they are. And by having a bunch of different types of Muslims, if you will, you know, writing from their experiences, whether it's SKLE or Hausa Faisal or you know, and Samir Ahmed's right. I mean, you know, these great writers, it gives you a chance to see that we're all different and we're all complex, and we're not going to agree with each other, and that's great. That's wonderful. And so yeah, the Muslim authors also were obviously very inspiring.
Yeah, life would be so boring if we were all just carbon copies of each other.
There's an Urdu poet who once wrote and said, imagine gardens if all the flowers were the same color. And he said, differences in the world make the world beautiful, because flowers are different colors and it makes gardens beautiful. So that was a great thought.
I love that. I'm gonna get that. Like, I want to get plants on the wall. I'm gonna get that, put it on my bookshelf. It's gonna be great. All right. So the food in this book made me so hungry. And I was reading it at 2 a.m. so I like was reading, get up, get a snack, come back, because he wants to be a chef, you know, he is a chef. And so there's all these gorgeous descriptions of food. So, true to Daniel, what is your comfort food?
I love, at the very beginning of the book, he's eating biryani. I love biryani. I think that's, my mom does a great job. My wife does a great job. You know, there are different kinds. There's so many different kinds. I read an article saying there are like 140 kinds. And I think maybe in my life, I've tried like 10. So really, I have a lot of work to do. So I'm looking forward to that. But it's, you know, there are different versions in different cultures that have variations. And so, yeah, biryani is my favorite food, and there's no close second. I
had a feeling from the way you wrote about his mom making it that it was going to be your answer, because I was just like, you can tell that this is like really like close, like, yeah, I'm just going to write a whole scene about this. And it was great, and it made me hungry. Every time he cooked in this book, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so hungry right now. Like, I stayed up to like 3 reading it, like, because I just didn't want to put it down. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm so hungry.
Yeah, I love food. I'm not a great chef myself, but there are a couple of things that I can make pretty well. But one of the cool things was, if you read the book and then you're ever in San Francisco or the Bay Area, you will know some cool places to go, because yes, there's a lot of food that he makes, but there's also a lot of food that he travels to and he goes and experiences. And so there's 2 different kinds of the foodie part of it too. And I'm more in the foodie camp than the chef camp. But
all right, I'm definitely gonna take it like with me to like
those restaurants. I think all the restaurants that are mentioned are actually real.
Oh, I love that.
They all exist. So.
I absolutely love that. I'm definitely going to be like, put on my Bookstagram, taking a picture of them. Oh man, now that I know they're all real, I'm totally hitting them up.
The only restaurant that isn't real is there's a restaurant that he goes to where he doesn't like the food, and obviously I didn't want to write anything negative about anyone's business. So that restaurant that he goes to where he doesn't like the food is not real, but everything else is real. So.
All right, so like I said earlier when I was talking to you, I'm just so into music, and it's how I connect with things. And so I listen to music while I read. And so I'm always curious, what songs would you associate with your main characters and with your book as a whole?
Well, the book as a whole is easy to answer because my process is really weird. My writing process is just terrible. Because
I'm gonna love this. Let's go.
Well, because I know a lot of authors sort of talk about pantsers and plotters, right? People who plot out their books and know exactly where they're going, and pantsers who just started writing. I'm an extreme pantser. I start with a blank sheet of paper and never make a plot. And so I don't know what's going to happen in the story. So which hopefully translates to surprise for the reader, because the reader will not know. If they know, they're smarter than I am, because I didn't know. In rom-coms, obviously, there's an expectation of the genre, and it's a little different. But when you're writing from a blank page like I do, you have to find structure somewhere. And I have always found the structure in music, weirdly enough. I'm not a big music guy. I mean, I love music. I love what I like. But I just am not very, I feel like I'm not, it's like people who talk about paintings. I can tell you what paintings I like, but I don't know anything about art. That makes sense?
That makes complete sense.
So I'm kind of the same way with music. I know what I like when I listen to it, but I don't actively go out and seek inspiration from music. But what's happened with all three of my books now is whenever I've been struggling with the plot or just trying to figure out where it's going to go next, music has been the breakthrough. And interestingly enough, even though, speaking of college and school, I was a horrible student when it came to Urdu. I was just terrible at it. Because I grew up speaking English. My dad was at the University of Texas, Arlington, when I was young. So I grew up in America, and then we went to Pakistan again. And I just never quite picked up Urdu the right way. But I love Urdu poetry, and I love Urdu songs, especially this one, Ghazal. For this particular book, it's written by this great poet. His name is Syed Masood, and let's see if I have something here. Yeah, right. In case anyone is interested, here is a book by Faiz Ahmed Faiz. It's a translation. He died, I think, in the 1970s, but he is, to me, the preeminent Pakistani author of our times, or poet of our times. And he wrote this wonderful poem, which in ghazals are poems that get sung. So it's become a song, and it's on YouTube. There's English subtitles by a company called Coke Studio, and what it is this revolutionary song that we will see if a day comes when there is justice in the world. And when there is justice in the world, these things will happen, and we will see what it's like. And so he wrote it about the revolution that he saw. Obviously, the British and historically the British left India and Pakistan, which was only really about 60, 70 years ago. So it's within living memory. And so that sort of revolutionary song, when I was writing about Churchill, was amazing. It was a great breakthrough for me, sort of just tying it all together in this sort of defiant spirit, which eventually Daniel's mom talks to him about in the book, about how he's likely scared to go do a presentation on Churchill where he's going to say some things that aren't flattering, and his mom says, when our ancestors went out and spoke up against the British, they weren't worried about not doing well on a school paper. They were worried that they were going to get killed. So you're fine.
In the grand scheme of things.
That's right. In the grand scheme.
Maybe you're doing all right.
So his entire work, but that particular song really became the song for the book as I was writing it. So there's always a song behind all my books so far. So I'm hoping that continues because it really helps. Whether it's for the plot or for theme or just the tempo and the pacing of the book, Yeah.
I like that. I'm definitely going to look up that song afterwards.
I
Also, to
will send
realize
you.
how cool it was to just see you reach back and go, and this book, by the way.
Well, just so happens that I have it here. But yeah, the song is called "Hum Dekhenge," which means "we shall see." Yeah, I can send you a link to the YouTube thing later.
Please do.
Um, but it's amazing how if he had been a writer who was writing in English, he would be one of the iconic greats. But and this is something I should probably explore in a book someday. But, there are all these great poets, and that I know of because I have access to a different language, right? But then I think about all the great poets that I don't have access to because I don't have access to those languages. And so it's a real shame if you think about it, because you can't really translate poetry, like not really, really.
Yeah, you can't.
And so, but they try to do a good job with Fez. I think that when the poetry is sung, it helps convey some of the meaning, even if the words don't always translate. But yeah, it's kind of really sad that there are these great poets who don't get recognized because of languages. It's not that languages have become fallen into disuse, but because of the colonial enterprise, and going back to Churchill, but because of the colonial enterprise, what's happened is that they've become devalued. Because part of colonialism is weird because it's not we hate you, it's we think you're not great, and so we want you to become more like us so that you'll be better, but just know you'll never be as good as we are at being us, obviously. So it's a really weird thing if you think about it. Anyway, sorry, that's a Trevor Noah pointed that out, and I've always been thinking about that. It's like, yeah, it's not that they didn't like the people they were oppressing, it's that sort of this weird, yes, be better by being more like us kind of thing. It's we'll make you who we are. It's very strange.
Definitely. I'm so glad I asked this question. I was like, I don't know if it's going to work, and I'm so glad I did it. All right. And the 10th and final question is, most of all, is there anything that you'd like to say out there to readers, aspiring writers, or just anyone that might be watching?
Well, I always feel weird about offering writing advice. Like I said, I stumbled to it myself. I don't have a plot or anything, so I feel like I'm not really qualified to do it. But I would just say read widely, whether you're a writer or a reader. Read as many people as possible. Read as many different points of view as possible. You're gonna see, as you read, you're gonna see different perspectives within the same communities. Read outside your comfort zone. Read genres you don't always read. You just never know. I mean, I got into history I would have never read history 10 years ago. And then someone gave me a history of Rome and I started reading it. And all of a sudden I was like, this is crazier than any fiction that I've read. This is insane. And so you start reading history, and then it just happened upon a book about Churchill, and it really changed my life because I ended up writing about it. So, read widely, read different genres, read whatever you can get your hands on. Be careful with history, especially, but really everything you read, because no matter what you're reading, you should always approach it with a skeptical mind. That's one of the points in the book is, people make decisions, especially in history, about what to tell you and what to withhold from you. And that can really shape your worldview. Because if someone tells you this is how the world unfolded, and then and then you accept that uncritically, you're going to miss out on all kinds of different points of view. So read and be careful.
All right. And with that said, everyone, thank you for watching this interview. We're going to have all the links to find Syed's social media and things like that, as well as the Goodreads page for More Than Just a Pretty Face. Please stick around for the rest of the tour. This was super fun, and I'm really glad I got the chance to interview you. I lucked out,
Thank you for having me. Thank you for reading.
I'm so excited for others to be able to read it when the book comes out. I'm incredibly excited. So make sure y'all stick along with the tour schedule. I'll have the link in the description for our tour schedule. Make sure to check out each stop, and make sure to read More Than Just a Pretty Face. Go pre-order it right now. And we'll see y'all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.